All right, so as we go over these quiz corrections, you want to go ahead and make sure that you are making the corrections as we go. Some of these I'll show you more than one way to solve the problem if that's possible. So starting off with number 1, Jerry sells dog houses at the city fair. Complete the table below to find how much Jerry earns for selling a certain number of dog houses. So this question is straight out of the framework. It's an example that basically the Department of Education is telling teachers, your students need to be able to do this. So this was something that we put on the quiz. You did something very similar to this in your notes earlier. So there are 2 ways you could go about solving this problem. This is an easy enough problem where I could find my constant of proportionality to solve this. Okay, I'm looking at, probably just want to start with the ratio that has the smallest numbers in it, because it's less, you're not multiplying large numbers, you're more likely to be able to find a constant proportionality, versus if I'm looking at right here, 8 to 40, I'm comparing it to 24 to question mark, and we're solving for question mark. I could use 20 to 100, however, I'd not be able to find a constant proportionality between 20 and 24. But I can between 8 and 24. So basically, this is like setting it up as equivalent ratios. So this is saying that 8 to 40 is the same as 24 to, again, question mark. So if you can recognize what you're multiplying 8 times to get 24, you can do the same in the denominator. So 8, if you know your multiples of 8, 8 times 3 is going to give you 24, so that's what I'm multiplying up here, or that is my constant of proportionality. I'm going to do the same thing for my denominator then, because if this is equal, then if I do one thing to the numerator, I have to do the same thing to the denominator, going back again to equivalent ratios. So I multiply 40 times 3, and you can do this by hand or with your calculator. You get your calculator. And that means that this number right here is going to be 40 times 30, which is 120. Now, if that was difficult for you to spot, to recognize that constant proportionality, the 8 times 3 gives you the 24, you can always set this up as a proportion. So you would set it up just like I did right here, but I'm going to create a variable instead of that question mark. So I'm going to do 8 over 40, and we're going to say it's equal to 24 over, and then you can pick any variable. A lot of times you see X as a variable, so I'm going to go along with that. You could do D for dollars, E for earnings, pick your favorite letter of the alphabet, doesn't matter. At this point, I'm going to cross multiply and divide. So I'm going to cross multiply. I'm going to have 8 times X on the left side, and on the right side, I'm going to do 40 times 24. So 8 times X is simply 8X. Then I have 40 times 24. Go ahead and use your calculator. That would give you 960. So I have 8X is equal to 960. The way that I get X by itself is then by dividing by 8. Whatever is in front of the variable, that's what I'm dividing by to isolate it, to get it by itself. So over to the side here, I'm going to write my answer because I'm running out of space below it. When I do 960 divided by 8, that would give me also an answer of 120, which is what we got when we used the constant proportionality up above as well. So sometimes some ratio tables, you can use a constant proportionality. If there isn't one, for example, if you had 20 to 100, that was your first ratio instead of 8 to 40, and you couldn't find what number you multiply by, just set up a proportion. It will work every single time. So I'm going to go ahead and circle answer choice D, 120. All right, and then next, number 2 tells me to find the unit rate. So it says 18 minutes for 6 songs. I want to find the number of minutes per song. That is, maybe it's recording, maybe it's playing, whatever it is. When we are doing unit rate per song, okay? So what that means is I can set up a proportion just like I did up top, and I'll show you a shortcut as well after that. So I have minutes per song, okay, where you see how this is set up kind of in the question there, or the second half of the equal sign, basically, second half of the equation. That's showing you the order. So minutes per song, okay. Remember when you set up a proportion, it's what you know for the first ratio, and then what you're solving for the second ratio, okay? I know for the first ratio, 18 minutes for 6 songs, okay? It looks like I don't have anything for that second ratio, but in fact I do. I want to know how many minutes it takes per song. That means for one song. So on the bottom here, where that's our number of songs, we would put a 1, and then we would just create a variable up top for the number of minutes, because that's what we're solving for. So at this point, you could cross multiply and divide. So I'd have 18 times 1 is equal to 6 times m. So again, this part is pretty simple. 18 times 1 is 18. 6 times m is 6m. To get m by itself to solve for it, you would divide by the number that's in front of it to get it to cancel. So I divide by 6 on both sides, and m is equal to 3. 3 minutes per song. Okay. Now, anytime you're dealing with unit rate, as you may have noticed in some other problems that we've done this unit, basically, if you just take those 2 units that you're working with, and this says minutes first, per song is second. So follow that same order just like you do with any other ratio. Take the number of minutes and just divide it by the number of songs, and that will give you your unit rate per song. So per, and we will talk about this more when we get to word problems, per is basically a keyword for division. Okay, so you just take the number of minutes and divide it by the number of songs, and that will give you the unit rate for that second unit for songs. Okay, again, we've done some other practice problems. Some of you may have already figured that out on your own at this point. Moving on to question number 3, the proportion is already set up for you. You just had to cross multiply and divide. Or this is another one you actually could have found the constant proportionality, but it probably was not as easy to spot. You'd be dividing or simplifying this in a way. All right, so if I cross multiply, I'm going to have 44 times 5 is equal to 4 times b. So I'll have to multiply 44 times 5, which would give me 220, is equal to 4b. And then, again, to solve for b, you would divide by the 4 that is in front of it to get it to cancel. You do the same on this side, and b is equal to 55. So it's almost like a backwards constant proportionality if you were to try and find that. Basically, I had a 44, I ended up with 4. What would be what could be that would give me 5? I'm dividing by 11 to change 44 to 4, or if I started with 4, it would be times 11 to get 44. So you could take 5 and multiply by 11 to get your original denominator, which would give you 55. That's probably harder to spot, especially since your variable's in that first fraction. So solving it as a proportion, just cross multiplying and dividing is probably the easiest way to get there. All right, so number 4, Nelson purchased a 3-pound bunch of bananas for 99 cents. At this rate, what is the price per pound of bananas? So this is, again, this is going to be unit rate. If it says price per pound, that's unit rate. So you would be able to set this up. We want to set up your units. So it tells you the order here, right? The first word is your numerator. The second word is your denominator, just like any other ratio. So price per pound. I set up what I know and what I'm solving for. Okay, so what I know is that he paid 99 cents. Now be careful. When you write this, it's not 99. You have to put 0.99. Okay, it's not 90. Otherwise, it's 99 wholes as opposed to 99 hundredths. And it'll totally throw off your answer if you don't write it with that decimal. And that price was for £3. Okay, so now again, it may be difficult to find anything for that second ratio, but again, you do have the denominator. Price per pound means for 1 pound. Okay, so that means my denominator for the number of pounds here that I want is 1. And then set a variable for that numerator. You're solving for price, so I'm going to go ahead and use P for price. Cross multiply and divide. So I have 0.99 times 1 is equal to 3 times P. Of course, this right here is 0.99. And this right here is 3P. I'm running out of space, so I'm going to have to kind of go up over to the side here. So if I want to get P by itself, that means I would divide by 3. So divide by 3 on both sides. And what I have over here, this cancels, I would take 99 cents, or 0.99, divide it by 3, you have your calculator, and that would give you 0.33 or 33 cents, which is answer choice D. Again, if you look at what we did up in question 2, price per pound, take the information that's given to you, what the price is, 99 cents, divide it by the number of pounds that's for, that buys you, and that is 3 pounds, and so you divide that out and you get 0.33. So this is a little bit, oops, slide over so you can see it. This is a little bit faster way to get there if you recognize kind of that shortcut for unit rate. Just take whatever the first unit is and divide it by the second unit, and that tells you how many of the first unit for one of the second unit. I'm going to slide this up a little bit and go on to question number 5. If you're still copying that, you can keep copying number 4. All right, and then number 5, we have Tatiana and her family are driving to Florida. They travel 204 miles in 3 hours. At this rate, how many miles will they travel in 7 hours? So this is not unit rate. You cannot just take something and divide or multiply by something else. You have to set it up as a proportion so you know really have a variable that you're solving for. So again, we have to look at what our units are. It doesn't matter which one you put on the top or the bottom. When we were doing unit rate, we really looked at what it said, like price per pound for the first unit when as the numerator, second unit one as the denominator. This doesn't specify any type of unit rate, so it doesn't matter which you put as a numerator and which is the denominator. The two things you're dealing with are miles and hours, okay? You have what you know, you have what you're solving for. Okay, so we know that Tatiana's family traveled 204 miles, so that's going to go up top. I have specified that my numerator will be the number of miles. You could have done it as the denominator on your quiz. You'll get the same answer. And that was over a span of 3 hours. At this rate, how many miles will they travel in 7 hours? So this time, instead of my denominator for my second fraction being a 1, it's going to be a 7. And there is no way for me to find a constant proportionality here. I cannot take 3 and multiply it by anything to give me 7. So I have to cross multiply and divide in order to solve this one. So I'm going to have 204 times 7 is equal to 3 times m. Do the math over here. I have 204 times 7 will give you 1,428 is equal to 3m. Note 1,428 was an answer choice and a lot of people picked it, but that was not your final answer. You still had to divide both sides by 3 to figure out what m was equal to. 1,428 divided by 3 would give you a final answer of 476. So if m is 476, then that is how many miles they would be able to travel in 7 hours. So this one did not have as many options for you to pick how you wanted to solve it. You had to take the information in the word problem, set up a proportion, create a variable, and solve for that variable.